I am Heidi McCarthy. I am the Program Director of Education Services here at Juwaneo. And prior to coming back to Juwaneo, which is where I started many years ago as a special education teacher, I worked for several decades in public education and mostly as an administrator of special education and chairperson of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and Committee on Special Education were components of those positions. So I have a lot of experience that I bring to this job with not only working with children, but with working with parents. And so often when I would meet with parents, I would hear them say that they had been told by others that when you go to the school district, you have to fight. You have to fight for services for your child. You have to fight for what you want for your child. And I'm here to tell you tonight that you don't have to fight. You have to partner, right? And as long as you form a partnership with the school district and the school district forms a partnership with you, so much can be accomplished on behalf of your child. So I'm going to go through a number of points as far as what happens when you are going through the process of having your child evaluated. So there are so many laws and regulations that govern protections for our students with disabilities. The federal laws and regulations as well as the state. And I will tell you that in New York State, many of the regulations that we have exceed what is required by the federal government. That there are laws that are protecting our children, there are laws that are guaranteeing that our students with disabilities will receive a free and appropriate education. And then there are also laws that are protecting them from discrimination. So different laws are saying different things. So you've probably heard of IDEA or IDEIA, which was authorization, and that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That is different from Section 504, which is more toward discrimination. So the IDEA is ensuring that your child will receive an education regardless of the severity of their disability. It will ensure that your child will be integrated in their educational experience alongside non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. It's going to ensure that your child has full access to a quality education program. And there are also many components of accountability. So school districts have to report back to New York State with regard to a number of different areas that ensure that there is accountability for what is happening in the school district and how the school district is providing an education and services to your child. Through the IDEA, if a child is classified through the Committee on Preschool Special Education or the Committee on Special Education, those children will have an IEP or an individualized education program developed for them. Section 504, however, is a bit different because that is based on discrimination or anti-discrimination, and that will ensure that an individual with disability, a student with disability, is not discriminated against, and that they will be provided accommodations so that they can access their education. Now, Section 504 and that anti-discrimination is not just for schools. So it's across the board. If you think of any publicly funded building, let's say the post office, right? There has to be a ramp for people to be able to get into the post office, right? If they can't walk up steps, that's an example of an accommodation. In school districts, there are a number of ways that we can accommodate for students, right? Simply, if a student is visually impaired or blind, to ensure that the learning material is provided in a format either large print or via Braille. Again, ramps, acoustic modifications and accommodations if a student requires that. But yet the IDEA which is going to develop an IEP for your child, is also going to provide instruction and services. Now, all students with an IEP are actually protected under Section 504. They're protected against anti-discrimination, but students will generally not have both, right? Because if a student has an IEP, they are protected through Section 504 against any discrimination. So I'll go through the process of the Committee on Special Education, or the Committee on Preschool Special Education, mostly similar, but there are some differences, so that you have a greater understanding of what's going on through that process and how you can ensure that you are an integral and vital component of that process. Too often, I will see parents come in, especially if it's their first time. You're in a room, there are all these professionals around you, you're hearing things about your child that may be concerning or unsettling to you. And too many times I've seen parents just sit back and feel that it's not their place to say anything. And I'm here to tell you tonight that your voice is probably the most important voice at that meeting, until such time as your child can attend the meeting, and then your child's voice is the most important voice. So never hesitate to speak at those meetings. So the committee is going to discuss the student's strengths and their successes. And when we develop a plan for a child, it really should be strength-based, right? We really should be working to address a child's vulnerabilities and weaknesses through their strengths. So it's really important to talk about their strengths. The committee is also going to discuss their challenges, what's difficult for the child. They're going to discuss the goals and visions for the students. And as a child gets older, as they're in the middle school and approaching the high school, there's a component of that IEP process that really looks at what are the goals for the child after the child is leaving school, whether it be when they graduate from high school with a diploma, or when they age out for those students who aren't able to attain a high school or Regents diploma. They can stay until 21 and age out then, the year in which they turn 21. But when a student is about 14 years old, there's a component of the IEP that I'll talk about in a little while that's talking about goals and visions. But when a child is young, talk about your goals and visions for the child then. You know, I'm hoping that when my child gets into elementary school, he or she will be able to be integrated into a classroom with non-disabled peers. Or I'm hoping that by the time my child is 6, that he or she will be able to say, Mommy and Daddy, or say, I need to use the bathroom. Whatever it is, based on your child's particular functioning levels, it's important that the committee knows what your goals are for your child. The committee, after reviewing a lot of information and hearing from parents and evaluations and all of the different components, they're going to make a determination if the student qualifies to be classified as a student with a disability. And there are a number, 13 different categories, classifications, which determine a number of things and levels of service, but quite frankly, aren't all that important in the scheme of things. Really what's important is that what's going to be recommended for your child and what are the goals for your child throughout the year. The committee is going to discuss what kind of supports or modifications the student has needed, and then what they will need in moving forward. And I'm simplifying the process right now, but after all of that, they're going to decide and recommend the programs and services that a student needs. And then they're going to develop a comprehensive and meaningful IEP. Now that IEP that they develop should be a document that if anybody who doesn't know your child picks up that document and reads it, they should get a pretty good idea of your child's strengths, your child's needs. So when you receive that document, if you're reading it and you're feeling that that document doesn't really capture your child, that would be something that you would want to go back and share with the chairperson of the committee. So the present levels of performance, like I said, we're going to be looking at academic achievement, language, social and physical development, and management needs. What are those things within the school environment, within the classroom environment, does that student need in order to be able to access their learning? It may be a specialized seating arrangement. It may be something like student needs to be alerted ahead of time before there is an alarm in the building, if that's possible. It's very specific based on your child's needs, and so that's discussed at the meeting, as well as, like I said, the programs and services or the related services, if the student needs any assistive technology, if the staff needs any particular training or support or consultation. Let's say your child has a visual impairment. Perhaps we want the teacher, the visually impaired, to have consultation with the teacher so that the teacher can better understand how to support your child's needs. I always recommend that before a parent goes into a meeting, they take time to sit down and write down what they want to share with the committee. It's very easy to think that you'll go to the meeting and be able to fully participate, and like a job interview, or like when you go to a doctor's office and you think ahead of time, okay, these are the 5 things I want to ask, and then you get into the doctor's office and you get distracted and forget 2 of them, right? So it's always important to write down what you want to share with the committee. Westchester Institute for Human Development, which is over in Westchester County. I could share more information about them in a minute, but they have developed this wonderful, and I will share this with, again, via email, the link to whomever, but they've developed this wonderful document. I'm not sure if you can see it here, but it helps a parent sit down before the meeting and think about those things that they want to share, how they want to contribute at the Students Committee on Special Education or Preschool Special Education meeting. This is not the only way to do it, but I like this because it kind of focuses the parent on those things that you may want to address. So your child's strengths, always start with the strengths, like I said before. The goals that you have for the child for the coming year. The IEP is developed for a year to be achieved within a year. So the goals that you want developed, addressed. So academic goals, everyday functioning or behavior. Your child may be exhibiting some behaviors and you're hoping that by the end of June, your child will be able to transition from one activity to another without having a bit of a behavioral outburst. Any of those things that you want to address. Social. My goal is for my child to be able to play with another child for 15 minutes. My goal is that my child be invited to a birthday party. Not that the IEP can guarantee that, but the IEP can certainly work on those behaviors that perhaps would enhance your child's ability to interact with other children in a more meaningful way. Physical, what are your goals for your child's physical development? Then to speak about the components of the program that have worked for your child this year. That is so important, because why reinvent the wheel every year, right? If you've seen something that's really worked, if the teachers or the assistants or the therapists have implemented something that you feel has worked really well, we're hoping that that's shared internally, but also you speak about it too. And then your concerns about your child's skills for the school program. Okay, so what is concerning you and what do you want to be implemented moving forward? As your child gets a little bit older, but it doesn't have to be all that old, your child's goals for life after high school, right? So as your child's getting older, and this is a component of the IEP too, but your contribution is so helpful. I'm hoping that my child is able to go to a community college. I'm hoping that my child is able to live in a supportive living environment. I'm hoping my child is able to live independently. Those type of things. As a student gets older, it's really helpful for them to also contribute. So for a student to add the things that they like, that they feel are working best in school, the things that are not helpful. As a student gets older, we get so much information from a student when we're doing something or using an intervention, and the student is thinking, I don't like this at all. And when so-and-so suggests that I do X, Y, and Z, it upsets me more than it helps me. So the student's voice, sometimes it's very enlightening. The things that I'm best at, the student would talk about, and the things that I need more help with. Like I said, this is just one example of what you can use, but if you can get your thoughts down prior to that meeting, it will help to keep you focused more on and make sure that you get that information out. And I'm sure as the conversation goes on, there may be other things that you'll jot down and want to add as well. Okay, so, I spoke a little bit about the different components of the IEP, and I don't want to take too much more time, especially since Jean is speaking here, but the IEP is going to give a lot of information as far as, again, the academic present levels, the academic needs, the social present levels, meaning where is the student now when the committee is meeting, and then what are the student's needs. And anything that's listed as a need for the student then will be lead to a goal that's being developed. Okay, so let's say a student needs to be able to identify the letters or improve recognition of the alphabet. Then there may be a goal saying that. As long as that skill is not something that all children at that age need to learn. Okay, so this IEP that's being developed is based on the student's deficit areas. Right, so you're not going to see goals that are the same goals as what the other children in the class are learning that are developmentally appropriate. You're going to see goals written based on the students' areas of need that are below the current age or grade level expectations. Okay, so the Committee on Preschool Special Education, or the Committee on Special Education, has met. They've developed an individualized education program for your child, or an IEP. On that IEP, it's going to give all of that information that I just shared. It's going to talk about the goals and all of the areas of need, and it's going to recommend programs and services. Consultant teacher or a special class, PT, OT, counseling, parent counseling and training, whatever it is, it's going to be on that document. So now what? So now you have this document, your child's in school, now what? Keeping clear and open communication amongst yourself, the administrators, the teachers, the student, that is so critical. And that partnership. So how do you do that? So based on my experience, I can give you a couple of recommendations. One is, take a look at that IEP. Like I said before, you want it to be comprehensive. You want that IEP, somebody can read that IEP and get a clear picture of your child. But if there's something that's not in that IEP that you think will be helpful for the teacher or the related service providers to know, tell them, right? Make sure that they know everything about your child that you think will benefit your child in the school environment. Now, they don't have to know kind of extraneous family information if it doesn't pertain to school, but if it does. I had a student once that was so turned off by the color green that if somebody walked into the room wearing green, she would go off. And the principal walked into the classroom to do a teacher observation, and the principal was wearing a green jacket, and the child went off, right? So something like that, just say to the teacher, hey, listen, heads up, green really turns my child in a different direction. Okay, so then they won't do color of the week green the day that the principal's coming in to do an observation. Another helpful thing is to share with the teacher or whomever you're speaking with the best way to communicate with you. Is it a phone call? Do you prefer email? Is it a text? Is it, once a week? Is it once a month? What is the way that you feel is the best way to communicate? Knowing that sound bites in a text, right, can be misread. But if you share, and then the teacher can share with you kind of the best way that they feel that they can communicate with you. Don't expect responses from teachers during the school day. Teachers are with students, and they're also planning and prepping for what they're doing. So teachers will try to do it if they have time during their prep period or sometimes right after school. And we like our teachers to respond within 24 hours. But if it's an emergency, then call the school and say it's an emergency, that you need to speak with somebody. Find out from the teacher what you can expect regarding communication. So you've shared with them how you like to communicate, then ask the teacher, what can I expect regarding communication? So that you've got that understanding from the beginning. How best to articulate your concerns. Ask questions like, how can you support the learning and the students' growth at home? What are the type of things that you can do at home? Again, you want to partner. The ladder of communication. Always go to the teacher or the therapist first. If you go to the administrator, and a good administrator will ask you if you've gone to the teacher first, and will also kind of investigate what's gone on by asking different people. But start with the teacher first, because there may have been a misunderstanding or a lack of communication that needs to be clarified, that could be cleared up between you and the teacher. And then the other thing is that time can be a friend, but it can feel like an enemy. And that's because you want to see results and you want to see them right away. Understandably so. It's your child. Different children develop at different paces. And so as long as you are seeing progress, it may not be as quick as you want to see it, but watch those little increments of progress. And as long as they are going in the right direction, continue that communication with the teacher. How can you support the learning and the progress at home? And just be patient with your child. The other thing that I think is important to know is that through these laws and regulations that I shared in the beginning, the requirement is for us to provide a free and appropriate education. And appropriate is key. It doesn't mean optimal. And so sometimes when there are conflicts between school districts and parents, it's because the parents want optimal, the very best in the world that their child can get. Understandable. I'm a parent too. That's what we want. The school district's obligation is to provide appropriate. And so there may be a disconnect between an appropriate education that will support your child making meaningful progress and optimal. And so being mindful of that and kind of helping that bridge by working together is extremely important. If you feel that you need support, if you've tried to communicate with whomever it is within the school district, and again, going up that ladder, but starting with the teacher or the provider or whomever, bringing somebody in, always in the spirit of, can you support and help to facilitate better communication between myself and so-and-so, right? Not as a negative or kind of administrative intervention in a negative manner, but I seem to be having difficulty kind of communicating. I've spoken with so-and-so several times. We're not connecting on this. I'm wondering if you could help kind of bridge this communication and bring your insights into a communication. If you're going that route and you feel that you've kind of hit a standstill and you're not moving forward, again, Westchester Institute for Human Development has an early childhood special education family and engagement community center, and they have so many resources there. And they can really, most of the parents that work there are parents of students with disabilities, so they've been through that process. They may be able to help you. There's student advocacy. There are other avenues where you can get support. As you go to get support, if you kind of feel that you don't have anywhere else to go, I would suggest that you approach it with whomever you're going to in the spirit of collaboration. I seem to have hit, a roadblock here. I might need somebody else to help me better collaborate with the district. Always look at partnering, because if it becomes adversarial, it slows things down, really. It may impede your ability to move things forward for your child, because it gets more tense. And so, I have certainly been in situations where parents have, brought in an attorney, and every parent has their right to advocate for their child. But I would hope that up until that point where you've done that and had to secure, legal counsel, that you and the district have done everything that they can to partner. And again, if you go into the process or start the process with whomever, finding ways to best communicating to them what your goals are for your child, making sure that your voice is heard at the committee meeting, making sure that your voice is heard with the teachers, sharing information about the teachers, being patient and understanding that the teachers are the administrators. Your child is one of many children that they're supporting. Your child is the most important child at the times when you're communicating with them, but there are other times when they're communicating with another parent about their child. So recognizing kind of that balance, but again, doing everything that you can to partner with them to keep that communication open, it's going to benefit your child. So the hope then is that your child has a successful school experience, and there's life outside of school as well. And so my colleague Jane Mullen is here to share with you more components about advocacy and entitlements and what's available for students with disabilities.
We do have one question.
Sure.
This question is, could something like nutrition or feeding goals be put into a child's IEP? It's not necessarily academic, but it affects him and it is an area of need.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I kind of breezed through I could probably do a 2-hour presentation on this. I breezed through that. Yes, if it is something that is impacting their educational performance, right? So if I give an example of physical therapy. If a child needs physical therapy in order to access the learning environment, right, then PT may be recommended. If feeding is something that your student needs because your student isn't able to feed themselves at school or eat if they don't have the oral motor skills that they need to have lunch during school, that may be something that's recommended by the Committee on Special Education. Quite frankly, feeding sometimes can go one way or another based on, is it an educational need, not academic, but within the realm of education and accessing their education, or is it more medically based? If it's more medically based, it may be something that you would go through your insurance rather than school, but it's certainly something that you can bring up to the Committee on Preschool Special Education or Committee on Special Education to consider. Any other questions?
No.
Do you have a question?
I have a question. I'm sorry. My name is Michael. I work here.
Hi, Michael.
So I just came in to sit down. That story or that case you had about that person who had a bad reaction every time he saw green.
Uh-huh.
Like why would he? What's the reason he would do that for?
I don't know. I don't know. It was just that color just stimulated an adverse reaction in him. It was actually a her, but it was just, if she would see that color, it would just set her off. And I don't know what it was in her vision or in her brain that caused that, but that was an important little piece of information that was helpful for the teacher to know. And quite frankly, that may even be something that would be put in an IEP if it was talked about at the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. There's so much more to this, so if anybody and I've been looking at this camera, and I think that camera might be for the Zoom, so I'm sorry, but if there are any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is heidi.mccarthy@juanio.org, and I'm happy to continue this conversation with anybody, okay? So I'd like to turn it over to Jane Mullen, who will continue on this discussion on how to support our students. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jane Mullen. I am a licensed clinical social worker who actually started my Rockland County career at Juanio in the school 29 years ago. I moved along, I retired, and now I'm back. So like Heidi, we found ourselves back where we started, and Juanio just pulls us back. But my role tonight is to talk to you a little bit about your child's opportunities outside the classroom. I think I'm understanding that the parents that are on this Zoom call have all young children. If you do not have a young child, if you're a parent of someone who's a little bit older, if you could just put your fingers up and let us know how old your child is, because otherwise I'm going to focus on the younger group. So what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about tonight about your very young children is to help you to start to understand what entitlements and opportunities there are for your son or daughter outside of the classroom. There are things more than just the IEP. A child has a full life like everybody else, so they have a lot of different domains. And the question about nutrition was very important and timely, because perhaps nutrition is not going to be served on an IEP, but there are other ways that we can access services for children who would have a need for nutrition, for feeding, and for other services. So the most important thing for you to know is I'm understanding that the children here are on the autism spectrum disability contingent, but this is true for any child with a developmental disability. You don't have to have an autism spectrum diagnosis. These children and adults are eligible to apply for something called Home and Community-Based Services Waiver. If you have that ability to access that service for your child, a whole world of opportunities can open up for that child. These services are things that will provide you first and foremost with a care manager who will help to advocate with your school, with your teachers, with your providers to access services or to enhance services for your child. It's very important to know that there is a lot of opportunities in the community. Very young children takes a little bit longer to get these kinds of services, but they're out there. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about how this all works. So a child or an adult for that matter, who is eligible for home and community-based services is someone who has a developmental disability that has been determined before the age of 22. As Heidi said, children before the age of 22 are classified as developmentally disabled. What I'm going to ask you as parents is to hold on to every single piece of paper that you have that has that information on it, whether it be a physical examination,
Pardon my interruption. I just wanted to let you know that we also have someone within the Zoom who is a high school educator.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can give you some information that you can take back to your students and your students' families. Thank you for letting me know that. So, teacher or high school person and parents, hold on to every single piece of paper that you have that diagnoses is identified, be it an IEP, be it a psychological evaluation, a physical evaluation, any kinds of reports. Those documents are vital to prove that your child has a developmental disability, because we need to go through Medicaid to access these services. And if you know Medicaid at all, they are strict. They're wonderful. They're the best access for services, but you got to prove that you need them. So hang on to every piece of paper that you have. In order to be determined to have that, you're going to need to become deemed appropriate. Deemed is a term that's used in New York State, whereby New York State has determined that you or your child is eligible for these services, because they've looked at all of these pieces of paper, they've spoken to whomever they need to speak to, including you, and they've determined that your child is eligible. All right, how do you do that? Well, it's a process. And I think what's most important is that everybody understands that in New York State, and probably most other states, it's a slow process, but it's a process and it does go forward. So I think you have to keep that in the back of your mind, especially if you have a very young child. All right? So if you want to access home and community-based services, you have to engage the assistance of a care manager. A health home care manager in New York State is a person, either man or woman, who will work with you to apply for all of the services you need, including Medicaid, if you do not, as a family, already have Medicaid. The word is waiver. This is a Medicaid waiver, which means that it's determined, the eligibility is determined based on your disability, not on your income. You know, straight Medicaid would be based on income, but not for a child or an adult who has a developmental disability. You can be making $1 million a year, but if you're eligible for home and community-based services, it's because of the developmental disability that's been identified and approved. So it's very, very important. As Heidi talked about, there is something called an IEP. Well, along with an IEP is a life plan. Your care manager will sit with you and determine all of your goals, all your needs, all your hopes, all your aspirations for your child. Develop a life plan. This will be the dynamic living document. If you're doing one for a 4-year-old and now your child is 7 years old, your life plan is going to be very different. You're going to continue to grow and to change and to move along. What the most important thing about a life plan is that the person who is the most in charge of the life plan, as Heidi said with the IEP, is the parent and or the child. As the child ages, the person for whom this life plan is developed, becomes the owner of that document. So how do we get there? Depending on the county you're in, each county in New York State has what's called the Developmental Disabilities Regional Office. That office is located in the county in which you live, and it's a satellite office of the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD, which is, of course, headquartered in Albany. We have something called the front door. Anybody who's interested in applying for these services has to go through the front door. The care manager will work with you to get you an appointment to go to the front door, which is a meeting with the DDRO to discuss your child, to look at the paperwork, to make that final determination and be deemed eligible for services. Once your child is deemed eligible, you will go through the Medicaid application process, again with a care manager. It takes about 40 days from start to finish. Once that Medicaid is approved and your child is eligible for home and community-based services, the process will begin to access the needs and desires that you've identified in your life plan. I think what's most important is for people to know there's a variety of services available based on the age of the person who's involved. Young children, such as the child with nutrition, would perhaps be able to access nutrition services through their waiver because now they have Medicaid to pay for it. So it's a very, very vital and very, very generous opportunity. If you're a high school person and you're about to transition, I'm sure the person on the call here tonight knows that now we have to access transition services. We're going to go from school-age services to adult services. How do we find those services, and what are they? There's a variety of services, from day hab, work, vocational, all sorts of different opportunities. Again, the care manager will work with you to find those opportunities, to get the applications in, and to get the balls rolling. Working with the school, with the teachers, with the advocates, with anybody else that you bring in for your circle of support to get that process started. There's a third opportunity among all of those other services, and it's called self-direction. Some of you may have heard of that already, and instead of just sort of saying, I want A, B, C, and D, you get a budget, and you determine from that budget what services you want to purchase. So instead of saying, all right, I'm going to go to day hab, or in this case, I'm going to go to after-school respite program and Waver's going to pay for it. No, I want to pay Mary Smith to come to my home and do services with my child. I want to get nutrition services. I jump back to that because it's a very common service that's sought after. Go back and purchase services there. You'll have a budget. You'll have a broker. You'll have a fiscal intermediary. But you and your child will sit, determine what those things are services you'd like to purchase, and the care manager, along with the broker, will access those services for you. I think it's really very, very important to know that there are a lot of services out there, but we have to pay for them. So I always feel that the sooner we get someone on care management, the earlier we can access services for people. It's much harder to try to purchase these services. They're very expensive. If your child likes equestrian services, therapeutic horseback riding, and you're going to pay for that, it's going to cost a lot of money. But you may be able to access it through your waiver program. So it's very, very exciting. So there's a lot of detail and nuances that we can talk about, but I think more importantly, what I'd like to do is to explain to you that there are several resources that are available, and I do have them, and we can send them out to you. Just a quick resource guide for the other opportunities that might be around, who to contact if you want to get home and community-based services, who are the care coordination organizations in our region that would be able to assist you, who to call, how to reach them. What other opportunities out there? Who else is out there? Autism Speaks is out there. Their headquarters in our region in White Plains. They have a variety of opportunities for people, as we discussed before, from age 0 all the way through adulthood. They are very, very good at assisting people with getting legal services if they need that for a lot of different reasons. So I would suggest that be something we consider and talk about if you'd like to do that. The other thing, and I'll just touch on this because I'm not sure if our high school person has this need, but for children or people who are not eligible through OPWDD, whatever their diagnostic profile looks like doesn't qualify them for services, but they still do have a disability. If they perhaps have a mental health disability, there's also a parallel care management organization program for them as well. And the process is similar. There are people that are, again, in our county that we reach out to, our local government units, that will work with each individual and family, child, to access services through that system. So there are 2 parallel systems that are available to assist families and recipients on accessing services. As far as advocacy goes, I'm just going to jump on what Heidi talked about. I think advocacy is probably the best opportunity for parents to serve their children in a way that provides opportunity. It makes known their needs, they advocate for their needs, and that is what turns things around in New York State. Parents who advocate for their children, either in a group, individually, as a cohort, they're the ones that make the difference in the world. I can advocate, Heidi can advocate, but you know what? When parents and individuals who are service recipients advocate, they're heard. So I would suggest always to join either a group of advocates in your community. If you are interested in what advocacy groups are in your area, we can talk about that and I can steer you in that direction. Your SEPTA programs are great advocates. I think most schools have them, correct, Heidi?
Either a SEPTA or a special education committee of the PTA.
Oh, right, all right. So SEPTA, which is the Special Education Parent Teacher Association, or a special education committee within the PTA. Either way, every district, I believe, still has those. They are your advocates du jour in the schools. So please don't be afraid to reach out to them. I would like to just offer you the same opportunity that Heidi offered, in that we are here for you. You can reach us. I am at jane.mullin, M-U-L-L-I-N, @juanio.org. You can email me, email Heidi, she'll get it to me. We can send you all of the documentation, and I would love to really talk again about all of these services for 2 hours and answer your questions, but we don't have 2 hours, and you certainly don't. So please, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or if you need any more information, please let me know.